Welcome. Welcome everybody to our Tutorial Tuesday with Zen Yarn Garden. Come on in. Welcome. Good evening. We'll just wait for everybody. Oh, hello. Hi from Michigan, Denise. We'll just wait to make sure there aren't any people in the waiting room still, and then we'll get started for today. But yes, if you'd like to be like Denise and open up your chat box and let us know where you're from, we always love to hear where you are tuning in from. Ohio, welcome, Linda. Hello, Louisiana. Hello, Carol. Oh, hi. Ooh, wonderful. Oh, from all over. This is great. Oh, Nutley, New Jersey. I'm in Harrington Park, New Jersey. So just a bit north of you, Andrea. Welcome. All right. Welcome. What do you think, Suzanne? Should we get started?
Yeah, I think go ahead. Let's get started.
Okay. All right. So welcome, everybody. My name is Shayna Billow. I'm a knitting teacher and knitwear designer. I do a lot of designs for Zen Yarn Garden, along with Suzanne Nielsen, who is also here tonight. Today we're going to be talking about, hey, Suzanne. Today we're going to be covering some of the different mistakes that can be fixed in stitch patterns. So I made a little swatch up before with a little bit of lace and a cable that's miscrossed, and I'm going to show you the ways that I would approach that to fix it. I'm so happy you're all here today, and I want to say thank you to Zen Yarn Garden for hosting these. This is our, I think our 26th Tutorial Tuesday, which is amazing. And just so you're aware, you can tune into all of the previous, the 25 ones, if you haven't caught them. You can tune into them on the Zen Yarn Garden YouTube page, so you can subscribe to Zen Yarn Garden. Last month we did, or the last time we ran these, we did some picking up errors and other in more simple stitch patterns. So if you're curious about that, you can certainly go and look up the video. Oh, thank you. Yep, and the link is right up in your chat box. Suzanne, do you want to talk about the...
Oh yeah, so I get to give away some gift certificates today. So do open your chat. We're going to ask some questions, and then the answers in the chat will determine who gets the gift certificates. So pay attention to some little details that Shayna shows us, or and yeah, that's the fun thing I get to do today. And then also post your questions in the chat. Or feel free to unmute and ask a question, and we'll make sure to get those in too. So
yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Susanna. If you have questions, I love questions. They get my mind going, and they help me help you, which I love to do. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn my camera over to my overhead and show you how I would fix some errors in lace stitching. Okay, so here we go. I've worked up a simple lace pattern. I call this one a simple pattern because essentially my lace stitches are aligned on top of each other. So here's a knit two together, and then in that same vertical column, I've got another knit two together, and my yarn overs are also aligned one on top of another. So this is a fairly, you may be looking at this and thinking, oh, Shayna's lying when I say that this is a fairly simple lace pattern to fix. But the stitches aren't going in all different directions or trailing up on top of one another at an angle. That makes it a little more challenging. So this, I've planted a couple of errors right here in my work, as you can see. So I'm missing my yarn over right here, okay? And then right over here, I've dropped this column off the needle by mistake, right over my knit two together. So I'm going to show you, or I think that's an SSK actually, but I'll show you how to pick those up. Additionally, before we start, I'll just refresh your memory on how to pick up stockinette stitch. So let's do that, but the lace pattern will be our focal point for the first half of our time. So stockinette stitch here, just to refresh everyone's memory, if you haven't seen this before, When you drop a stitch in stockinette, so knit a row, purl a row, if you're working flat, what you're going to do is take a crochet hook that's a similar size to your knitting needle, slide the last stitch that you can find onto that crochet hook, and then lift up these ladders through that loop one after another. So this is how you would fix generally a dropped stitch in stockinette. We're going to use that same technique to fix these lace patterns actually, and the cable. All right, so here I've noticed that I have a mistake right here, a drop stitch. I'm actually going to make it worse so that you get more out of this session. I'm going to actually undo the 2 stitches. Yikes, right? That's so scary. Okay, so I'm going to knit 1. I'll start my pattern. Knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and this is where I would have slip, knit again, but I'm missing my stitch, and it's way down here, I've noticed. So what I'm going to do is align these stitches on the crochet hook. These are the 2 that were meant to be together as an SSK. So I'm going to align them together on the crochet hook so that they're twisted on the crochet hook essentially. And I'm going to pull them up through that bar there. And then to the left of this stitch here, I've got some more ladders. They're just hiding a bit. So I'm going to be lifting these up one after another. I'm going to slide that one over for now so that I can get my stitch right on here. And then I've picked up that drop stitch and I've put it back into the SSK that it was. So let's say here, okay, I've got my yarn over and then my SSK. Notice as I do this SSK, let me slow down with that. Here with this SSK, I'm slipping a stitch like a knit, slipping another stitch like a knit, and both those stitches are sitting crooked on the needle. So what I had down below here were these 2 stitches arranged on my crochet hook in that same sort of backwards formation, and then I knitted them together with the hook, essentially, because I had the bar right above it. So what I'm doing when I fix these kind of more tricky mistakes in pattern, I think about what the structure of my stitches are, what these columns are telling me to do, and how the stitches sit with one another to be repaired. So you'll notice these 2 stitches converge right underneath that one there into an SSK. And they converge heading towards the left rather than a knit 2 together where the 2 stitches converge going off to the right. Okay, so they're very subtle differences in our knitting. It's kind of neat. My next error is right here. I have a dropped yarn over. And whenever you encounter something like this, if you prefer, you can always stick a stitch marker on your fabric or on your needle to remind you that you have an error there so that you can work across the row until you get to the spot where you know you have an error. So that's my knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1. Now here is where I'm missing a yarn over. So yarn overs are simply this bottom ladder here. If you notice this ladder lingering at the bottom, there's simply this ladder picked up and dragged through the others. So earlier when I dropped a stitch over here, we had a little stitch sitting at the bottom that I was able to put my hook into and then pull each of those ladders up through each of those rows and repair them. Here with a yarn overs come from midair, sort of. So let's watch me do a yarn over just like this. I'm not using an actual stitch or a column to create this yarn over. Simply the act of wrapping the yarn around the needle is what creates a yarn over. So when you drop a yarn over, there's nothing at the base of it. There's no actual stitch that you are to pick up. The yarn over was just a strand of yarn like this one here that was wrapped around the needle, and then you proceeded with the rest of your pattern. So all you do to pick up a dropped yarn over is you lift up the bar where the yarn over should have been, and then you drag the rows above it straight through. So that's how you would pick up a yarn over. And then another little trick with the yarn overs is if you forget to do your yarn over in a spot and then you just keep going with your pattern. So let's say I'm going along with my pattern. Okay. And I'm going to turn around right here and head back. And I realize that I'm missing my yarn over right here. So we'll pretend now that I have a wrong side row to do. We'll pretend, don't worry about the cables right there. So right here, I'm going backwards now until I get to that spot where my yarn over is missing. Okay, so right here is where my yarn over is missing. All you do to lift up a yarn over that you forgot to make is pull up this strand, this horizontal strand that's laying between the two needles right here. Put it onto your left needle from front to back, and there's your yarn over again. So it's easy to rescue a yarn over that you've forgotten to do when you're coming back on the next row. So let's say you're knitting a project with 100 stitches and you've done, 98 of them, and you realize in the first 2 you missed a yarn over. Well, you don't have to rip out the whole row. You can simply go back later on and pick it up. So you can place a stitch marker where you know you're missing your yarn over and then grab it on the way back. Okay. Oh, dropping an edge stitch a few rows back. Sure, yeah, I can do that. Absolutely. So thank you, Karen. That's a great idea. So let's think. I wonder, Suzanne, should I do the cables now? Or should I do a quick edge stitch and then we'll take our 15-minute break?
Yeah, let's do the edge stitch while we're
beautiful. Okay, so I'm just going to slide these guys over so I can access the edge. Okay, so Karen asked to see an edge stitch, and I like to always draw out why this works the way that it does. All right, so that you can see what happens. So with knitting, right, we have our stitches aligned in every row like this. Each of these little V's is a stitch. And as you're working across a row, so we start here with stitch number 1 and we go in this direction, stitch 2, 3, 4. Here I'm knitting stitch 5. And then I'm turn my work around and I go back to knit row 2, starting with stitch 5. And these 2 stitches get a little connection next to them. So at the edge of every other row, these stitches are connected on the side. So here, when I turn, it goes like this. And here, these stitches connect like this. So when I dropped a stitch before, we ended up having that long ladder between them. When you drop an edge stitch, those ladders actually look like this every other row because they have this connection. So if you were to drop these stitches as ladders, here's the edge stitch, it makes a giant loop. Okay, just so you can understand what you're seeing when I drop that stitch. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to drop this stitch here. And sometimes you really have to fight to pull it out. So here we go. I'm really ripping them out. Incidentally, this is a great way to self-fringe a scarf or something like that. If you wanted fringe along the edges, you can purposefully drop your stitches like this. So you can see I've got all these weird loops. Each of these loops represents 2 rows that need to be picked up. So I'm going to pick up my very last loop. This one looks loose. So sometimes when they look loose, I like to rip it out, rip an extra row just to make sure I'm grabbing a single row here. And then this is my first set of loop. And so what I'm going to do is pick up the bottom edge of the loop and then the top edge. Because remember, each of these loops is 2 rows. So here's one row and the other. This was row, let's call it 10. And here is row 11, for example. And then this loop has 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. So I'm picking up one loop, one half of the loop, and then the other half of the loop. Now, if you had been working slip stitches, you would just pull the single loop through. But here we had been working each stitch at the edge of our row. So I'm holding open the loop with my left hand, making sure that it's not twisted. And I'm going to come up and then up through the second bar. If you have, if your hands aren't so dexterous, what you can do is actually hold open the loop on, say, your ironing board. You can put a pin in it And then, well, here I'm holding this, but if you had a T-pin stuck in there, you'd be able to hold open the loop so that you could work both of those strands. So first strand and second strand. That's a great question. The edges always befuddle people for sure.
Mhm.
You know,
And
it's
like
very,
Shana mentioned, if you're doing a different kind of selvage, then you have to think about what you're doing a little bit more. But the basic idea is that, you know, picture those loops coming out.
yes, exactly. So if you have slip stitches, the connection between one row and the other is really just a single stitch. And then it's a little loose here. So typically anytime I'm fixing mistake, if it's a little bit loose, I will steam out my piece afterwards. So like here where I picked up those SSKs and yarn overs, if there was any uneven tension, I would steam it out or play with it a little bit to try to get it to lay flat. But let's take a quick break at our halfway point.
Yes, let's switch. I'll ask a question and give Shana a little break here. All right, so what was open your chats. I think I'll take the first answer today because it's a hard question. So if you want to get it first. So open your chats, get ready. What was the first decrease that Shana fixed? What kind of decrease? All right, Carol, you got it. All right, it was an SSK. So Carol, go ahead and send your email address to in the chat. You can select just Zen Yarn Garden and send your email address, and then they'll get you the gift certificate. Congratulations.
Wonderful, congrats. Okay. All right, we're going to head over now to the cable portion of our swatch so I can show you how the structure of cables works. And for those of you not familiar with how to work cables, generally speaking, what you're doing is knitting stitches out of order. So let's say I have 4 stitches on my knitting needle, which I will down here. I have stitch 1, stitch 2, stitch 3, and stitch 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put these first 2 stitches on a holder, on a cable needle or a holder, double point, whatever, hold them to the front or back of my work, depending on how I want the cable to cross. And then I'm going to knit the stitches in this order instead. So now I have stitched, technically, this was stitch 3 before, 4, 1, and 2. Okay, so that's essentially a quick lesson in how cables work. And I'll show you on my swatch too. Okay, so here we go. I have 4 stitch cables here. So there are 4 stitches involved in this cable crossing. The first of the 2 stitches crossed over the second 2. That's how I have this cable that sort of slants to the left. But whoops, I crossed this one the wrong way. This one, I put those first 2 stitches behind stitches 3 and 4. And so my cable now is slanting to the right. So that's a problem. Now, imagine you were knitting an incredible sweater or shawl with all these cables everywhere. It would be heartbreaking to have to rip 6 rows for one spot. So what I like to do here is I'll actually drop down all 4 of these columns at once, recross my cable, and then pick up those stitches. So let's get to it. I'm going to drop all 4 off at once. Okay. Undo these tails. So now my ladders are especially long and loopy. That makes sense because it's 4 stitches worth of knitting, of yarn. All right, so here we go. I'm undoing this row. Still hasn't popped open yet. So I'm going to grab this one out. And here we go. My stitches are now uncabled. They have been uncabled. What I'm going to do here is just quickly grab them on a double pointed needle so that I don't lose anything. All right. Now my cable, the way it crosses is that the first 2 stitches come in front of the second 2 stitches. So I'm going to grab the first 2 on the needle, move them in front of the second 2, and then I'm going to slide them all back in that new order. So this is the way that I want my cable to cross once I've started picking up stitches. All righty. Now what I am going to do, I know it's a little wild looking. I'm going to grab my crochet hook and I'm going to start with stitch 1 on the right. Well, the new stitch 1. This had been stitch 3, of course. I'm going to go up through each ladder. Notice I'm kind of holding them tight in my left hand because there is so much yarn here. You don't want to get them tangled up. That's probably one of the hardest pieces of this, is trying not to tangle up these strands and get them out of order. So you can see here, they're all lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're nice and straight, nothing's twisted. All right, so here I'm going to grab now my second stitch on the needle, which happened to have been my previous 4th stitch, but now that it's cabled, it's in a new position. And I'm picking up all of these rows one after the other, just like so. Okay. Oh, let's see. Nope. All right. Then I'm picking up this stitch. Get the idea, I hope. One after another, I'm just working up those cables. And then here, my final stitch goes on the hook, and I'm going to grab these. So now with this technique, you do get a lot of tension issues. So what I'll do here is just, well, first of all, yay, my cables crossed the correct way. What I would do here is sort of adjust the tension manually. So I see that these stitches are a little bit tighter than these. So I would take a little bit of the excess yarn from the looser stitches and share it with the tighter stitches that are on the other side. So there we go. And then just for fun, why don't I show you how to do the cable when you don't have the mistake, for anybody who's not familiar. So what you do to make a cable, in this case, I have a 4-stitch cable. So half of my stitches are going onto my cable needle. I'm going to hold them to the front of the work. I then knit 2 stitches, and then I knit the 2 from the cable needle. And I'm actually going to intentionally drop this stitch so I can show you another fix. Okay. And then you finish your row. So that's how you would knit a cable, but oh no, I dropped a stitch and it keeps going and going. Yikes. And it's cabled. A little scary, right? Yes. What I'm going to do is lift up those ladders and just follow them to the left. I'm going to slide this stitch over. I'm going to have them keep going in their cable direction. Over here. And I'm going to grab up this loop here to redirect the cable. So each of these columns in the cable is still able to be fixed on its own. What I had fixed before was where all 4 columns had a problem, but if just one of these stitches, one column has a problem, you can certainly just drop down and fix that cable. So again, this was a cable that slants to the left, and I fixed it right there without having to rip my entire piece. So that's a benefit, of course, if you're knitting something that's heavily cabled. How's everyone doing with that? Any comments, questions? Yes.
Oh, I was going to add to just another way to fix a cable. If you like notice it after you're like done with your sweater, practically. Do you want to talk about that, Shayna?
Yes, or? Duplicate stitch. Yes.
Duplicate stitch, yeah.
Love duplicate stitch.
It thicker, but it
yes.
could save you from.
Oh my gosh, ripping a whole thing. Yes, I once had, it always happens this way. I'll be blocking something, and that's when I realized, like looking at the whole piece kind of without the tunnel vision of actually working on it, that I have a big error. So let's say you have your beautiful blanket that you've knit, and all of a sudden you realized one of your cables is crossed the wrong way. You can take your working yarn and then right below the cable, work a duplicate stitch to cross it back the opposite direction. So I'm starting right under the cable right there, and I'm grabbing this stitch here. I'm going right on this side. So notice I'm creating a whole new line of stitch right here, and this stitch is crossing the correct way, or the way that I had intended the stitches to cross. Okay. And then you adjust your tension to make sure it matches that of your knitting. And presto, now I have my cable that's going to the right. Instead of the one that was miscrossed going to the left. Thank you, Suzanne. That was a good reminder.
Yeah.
And then I put the wrong tail in the wrong side. Then I would just push my tails to the wrong side and weave them in. Yay.
Yay.
Hooray. And so saved. Yeah. I mean, I love knitting. I love all my time spent knitting, but I do really like to finish things also. So I tried to come up with clever ways to not have to rip out an entire piece or multiple rows in order to fix one small section with a problem.
Yeah.
So I hope you're all inspired perhaps to give that a whirl yourselves.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And we still have one more gift certificate that I get to give out.
Hey.
So let's see. This is for a $20 gift certificate to the Zen Yarn Garden website. So in your chats, open your chats up. Let's take the third answer this time. And let's see, just like generally, I mean, it doesn't have to be the exact right thing, but what color yarn was Shayna using? And she's not showing, it's not being shown right now. Do you remember what, like?
I should have been using Zen yarns. I just realized.
Well, no, I just meant like the general feel. Yeah, like we got these answers. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna say whitish pink. Okay, let's see what I said third answer. All right, so let's take Anne and Patton. You won. So yeah, light. So go ahead and send your email to myself or to there's one person that's Zen Yarn Garden too on here. You can send it to that or to me, and we'll get you your gift certificate.
Oh, and I'd like to remind everyone, we have another session next week. I will be working with you on taking gauge in pattern. So when you have a sweater or project that calls for your gauge to be done in the pattern, so with cables or with lace or with fair isle or garter stitch or ribbing or what have you, how to measure your gauges when you are in pattern. So please join us next week. We're here for a few more minutes if anybody, oh, and the link to sign up for that was just posted in the chat. So feel free to click that and register now so that you get the link and the reminder for next week. And does anyone have any other questions for today's session? I'd love to hear them.
And we will be giving out more gift certificates next week. So, or some kind of, we always have some kind of special, you know, enticing thing. So
it's always
just learning.
It's always fun with Zen Yarn Garden. We so appreciate that you were here tonight. And I want to thank Zen Yarn Garden again for hosting these Tutorial Tuesdays. They are phenomenal and a lot of fun. It was great seeing everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Shayna. Great job.
Thank you, Suzanne. Oh, yay. Thanks, Linda. All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.